The bells of St. Mary's toll in heavy waves, each strike folding into my chest like iron doors slamming shut. The scent of lilies clings to the damp September air, suffocating sweet and merciless. I keep my eyes fixed on the coffin draped in black velvet, as if staring long enough might make Daniel's hand knock from the inside, the way he used to tap the table twice when he finished reading. I am Elena Marlowe, 62, a restorer of manuscripts who has spent decades coaxing fragile words back from the dead. Today, I am supposed to bury the man who shared my life. But when the priest raises his voice in prayer, my phone vibrates in the pocket of my coat. A low, urgent buzz impossible to ignore. I freeze. Who would message me now? My fingers grope for the device, cold and slick with sweat. The screen blazes against the shadowed nave. 4 words appear, jagged as a blade. I'm alive. Trust no one. For a heartbeat, I cannot breathe. My knees threaten to buckle. The coffin blurs into 2, then 3 shapes. Around me, mourners bow their heads, their sobs echoing off the stone walls. They don't see me clutching the phone as if it weighs 1,000 pounds. Daniel, the name claws through my skull. Dead husband, beloved traitor, ghost who texts from beneath the soil. I sink into the pew, heart pounding. My palms tremble so violently the phone nearly slips. The device is slick with sweat, as though it too recoils from the message. A rush of blood roars in my ears louder than the choir. I whisper, lips barely moving. No, it's impossible. But the words burn on the screen, unyielding. My instinct is not to reply. Instead, I press record. The voice memo app opens with a single red dot, pulsing like a wound. My thumb hovers, then commits. A faint click, the sound of truth being preserved. Because whatever game Daniel plays, hoax, warning, madness, I need evidence, proof that grief has not unhinged me. I feel the eyes of my son Marcus slide toward me from across the aisle, his brows knit in a frown, suspicion flickering. I shove the phone back into my pocket, pressing it tight against my thigh as if to smother its betrayal. The priest's words drone on. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I hear only the phantom echo of Daniel's voice, once steady as an anchor. Elena. Some texts outlive centuries. Trust the ink, not the hands that hold it. And now, this text. Alive. Trust no one. The lilies choke me. The candles drip fat tears. My vision narrows to the coffin, the message, the impossible truth threading between them. Grief fractures into suspicion, then into something sharper. Resolve. I press my lips together until they ache, holding back a cry that would tear the ceremony apart. No one must know yet. Not Marcus, not the congregation, not even the priest, especially not Marcus. The phone grows heavier with every second, a stone dragging me under. My pulse hammers against it, sinking with the recorded silence. In that moment, one thought brands itself into my mind. Daniel's funeral is not the end. It is the beginning. The old tape recorder sits on my desk now, its chrome edges dulled with time, a faint scratch across the play button. Daniel gave it to me on our wedding day, tucked inside a box lined with parchment paper instead of velvet. He had laughed when I unwrapped it. Elena, one day you'll see. Every manuscript carries a soul. This will help you catch its breath. Back then, I believed him. I pressed the red button and captured his voice reading lines of Ovid. Shaky but passionate, like a man falling in love with language itself. I thought I was capturing the beginning of a marriage. I did not know I was rehearsing for its end. Now, decades later, I find myself pressing record again, not to preserve poetry, but to catch lies. We started with nothing. In 1985, our bank account barely scratched 327, the rent overdue, my hands raw from handling brittle vellum in the basement of the Bodleian. I worked 16-hour days restoring faded ink, earning $6 an hour. Every coin felt heavy, a reminder of survival. Daniel dreamed bigger. One day, Elena, we'll have a lab of our own. No more basements, no more borrowed lamps. So I paid. Tuition for his postgraduate course, 7,800. A rented flat on Broad Street with ceilings that leaked, 450 a month. When his first grant application failed, I dipped into my savings, 4,200 meant for my father's medical bills. I told myself it was love. That sacrifice was a down payment on our shared future. There were moments that almost made it worth it. I remember sitting cross-legged on the floor while Daniel read aloud a crumbling medieval sermon, his voice hushed as though the dead priest might overhear us. My fingertips were stained with ink remover, my nails cracked, but his eyes shone as if we were holding treasure. I used to keep every receipt in a leather-bound ledger. I still have it, pages filled with neat columns, my cramped handwriting marking paper, acid-free, 62, 50, UV lamp bulb, 31, Daniel's conference ticket, 19.8 mounds. That ledger became our second Bible, except I was the only one praying over it. Sometimes, when exhaustion blurred my sight, I'd hear his voice again. Elena, one day you'll see manuscripts breathe. Don't you want to give them air? And I'd whisper, even now, as I stare at his message glowing on the phone. Then where is your soul now, Daniel? The tape recorder catches my whisper. A soft click. A ghost preserved. I should have seen the signs. There were nights Daniel stayed out late, claiming the lab kept him. But once, when he returned past midnight, his coat reeked not of dust and ink, but of cologne I didn't own. He brushed past my question with a kiss on the forehead. You worried too much, Elena. I told myself not to pry. Scholars were eccentric, weren't they? Their heads always in manuscripts, their hearts always somewhere else. Another time, while balancing the ledger, I noticed 2,000 pounds withdrawn without explanation. Daniel waved it off. Equipment. Don't bore yourself with numbers. But numbers were all I had. They kept me tethered while he floated in theories and dreams. Still, I carried on. I stitched bindings until my fingers bled, lined brittle pages with Japanese tissue as thin as breath. I told colleagues proudly, Daniel is opening his own research institute. What I didn't tell them was that I had mortgaged my mother's cottage to fund it. The motif returned, always. That recorder. On nights when loneliness pressed hard, I'd rewind and listen to the crackle of Daniel's younger voice, reading lines from Cicero, what is left of life, if not memory? Memory became my drug. It dulled the ache of giving too much. Now, standing at his funeral, I realize the ledger is heavier than any coffin. Every line I wrote was a promise. Every pound, a piece of my faith. And what did I buy? A phantom. A man who sends messages from beyond the grave, laughing at my devotion. I want to scream at the mourners. Don't weep for him. Weep for me. I built his empire brick by brick, and now it crumbles in my hands. Instead, I keep silent, whispering only to the recorder. I bought illusions, not love. We were so young, so unprepared for the weight of survival. The first year of our marriage was a collection of patched days, me bent over torn folios, Daniel scribbling in notebooks no bank would fund. Our flat smelled of mildew and ink. I remember the ceiling dripping after each storm. Our only defense, a row of metal pans catching the relentless drops. The rent was $220 a month, a mountain then. I stitched manuscripts for libraries to cover it, my hands raw, my eyes aching. One winter night, I collapsed at the desk. A half-mended book lay open, its parchment edges curling like burnt paper. Daniel sat beside me, reading aloud in Latin. His voice carried me into sleep, deep and safe. When I stirred, a heavy warmth cocooned me. He had draped his wool coat over my shoulders, the only good coat he owned, thick, brown, and smelling faintly of cedar. I smiled through half-closed eyes. That night, I believed love was shelter, that his voice and that coat would protect me from the world. Years later, in a forgotten storeroom, I would find the same coat crumpled in a corner, moth-eaten, abandoned. The sight struck harder than any betrayal. A few weeks before the funeral, Daniel began to change. Subtly at first, then in ways I could not ignore. He took phone calls in the garden, whispering, turning his back to me. When I asked, he smiled with that infuriating calm. University politics, Elena. Nothing worth your worry. One afternoon, while restoring a psalter, I borrowed one of his reference books. A folded slip fell from its pages. Numbers, dates, a foreign bank code. I stared at it, heart racing. When I confronted him, he slid the slip back into the book and kissed my temple. Investments. You know I'd never risk us. I wanted to believe him. I told myself I was imagining shadows. You've been paranoid since your father died, I whispered in the mirror, but the unease sat in my chest like a stone. The memorial service was supposed to close the chapter. Instead, it ripped the binding apart. I stood with Marcus, my son, as mourners lined to offer condolences. His grip on my arm was tight, almost too guiding, as though he feared I might collapse. Then he leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. Mother, don't grieve too much. Father, he might still have secrets you don't know. The words sliced through me. Before I could reply, an old colleague of Daniel's arrived, face pale, voice trembling with a slip of truth. He promised me he'd return once he finished his business. Business. Promised to return. My lungs seized. The church spun. The tape recorder I kept hidden in my pocket tumbled to the stone floor. Its battery hatch snapped open, the small silver cell rolling under a pew. The sound cracked louder than the priest's sermon, echoing like gunfire. Heads turned. My cheeks burned. I bent, fumbling for the pieces, but my hands shook too violently. The recorder, my talisman, my witness, lay broken at my knees, a mirror of my heart. I bit back a cry. The coffin loomed only feet away, yet the words I had heard cut deeper than death. It was the smallest thing that broke me. A teaspoon rattling in my teacup one quiet morning, the sound so shrill in the silence of the kitchen that it cracked open all I had been trying to seal shut. I sat alone at the oak table Daniel and I once shared with friends and laughter. Steam rose from the cup, but I couldn't taste anything. My phone lay face down beside it, heavy with the last message he had sent from the grave. I'm alive. Trust no one. I stared at the grain of the wood, tracing its knots like fault lines. Every groove whispered of years I had funded, of sacrifices I had stitched into the seams of our life. And now, what was I, widow, fool, or accomplice to a lie? The questions came fast, hammering my ribs. Am I a wife, or just a walking vault? Am I grieving him, or paying rent for his deceit? If I stay silent, will they bury me too under the same pile of lies? If I act, will I finally breathe again, or will I suffocate alone? Each question cut deeper, sharper than grief itself. My eyes fell on the laptop, still open to my banking portal. Daniel's research fund sat listed among the scheduled transfers. Every month, $2,000, leaving my account as faithfully as a prayer whispered to deaf ears. I hovered over the cancel button. My hand shook. I could almost hear Daniel's voice behind me. Elena, you know this is for the greater good. Greater good? For whom? For what? The cursor blinked. My pulse roared. I pressed. A soft chime confirmed. Transfer canceled. The sound was tiny, almost polite, yet to me it thundered like a cathedral bell. My chest heaved. I closed my eyes, feeling the burn of oxygen I hadn't realized I was holding back. For the first time in decades, the money would not flow out of me like lifeblood drained by someone else's hand. I clenched my fists, feeling the blood return to them, tingling, alive. But fear clawed at me immediately. If Daniel truly was alive, he would know. If Marcus discovered the halted payments, he would demand answers. If I had misjudged everything, I might condemn myself to loneliness, to suspicion, to a war I wasn't ready to fight. The stakes towered before me. Keep paying, and I would remain the invisible engine of Daniel's schemes, bled dry until nothing was left. Stop, and I might unleash a storm I could never put back in the bottle. The spoon in my cup stopped rattling. The liquid stilled. So did I. A line of clarity ran through me like a wire pulled taut. I had been living as a victim, a mute witness to betrayal. But this act, however small, was mine. I whispered into the empty kitchen, voice steady at last. No more. The silence after was vast, but it did not crush me. For the first time, silence was mine to keep. After I pressed cancel, the house itself seemed to notice. Silence spread like mold through its corners. Marcus no longer called each evening to check in. When he did, his voice was clipped, rehearsed. You're managing, mother. The pause after managing hung like a threat. I forced a smile into the receiver. I am, a short brunt answered me. Then the line went dead. At dinner the following Sunday, the air turned solid. My daughter-in-law, Claire, clinked her fork against the plate without ever lifting her eyes. Marcus asked nothing about my health, my work, not even about the manuscript on my desk. He chewed slowly, jaw tight, as though each bite restrained words he dared not yet speak. I filled the silence with nervous questions. How is work? How is the flat? But they landed like stones in a well. No answer rose back. Only the scrape of cutlery, the creak of chairs. The meal ended without dessert, without laughter, without their usual request for a little help with rent this month. The omission chilled me more than any demand could have. Days stretched, brittle and thin. The house was too quiet, the phone too still. When a message finally came, it was barbed and vague. We hope you're making sensible decisions, Mother. I stared at the ellipsis, my skin prickling. Sensible to whom? Sensible for what? One evening, as I walked past the study, I heard them. Whispers behind the closed door, Marcus and Claire thinking I had gone upstairs. She suspects, Claire hissed. Then we move quickly, Marcus replied, before she shuts everything down. I froze in the hall, hand flat against the wallpaper. My pulse thudded so loud I feared they would hear it. I wanted to fling the door open, demand the truth, but I didn't. I stood there, absorbing their voices like venom through skin. When the door creaked a moment later, I had already retreated to the kitchen, pretending to rinse cups. Marcus's glance lingered on me too long, his smile too sharp. Nights became heavier. Every footstep above me echoed like an accusation. Every phone buzz made me jump. I began to notice small shifts. The way Marcus studied me with narrowed eyes, the way Claire locked her purse even when she only left it in the living room, as though I were the thief. I told myself to stay calm, to wait. But waiting felt like balancing on a thread pulled tighter each day. The knock at the door came sharp, deliberate, like a gavel announcing judgment. I opened it to find Marcus standing tall, Claire tucked neatly behind him. A man in a gray suit trailed them, briefcase in hand, his expression professional and cold. My living room, once scented with ink and parchment, now felt like a courtroom summoned against me. They didn't sit as guests. They arranged themselves as a tribunal. Marcus in the armchair opposite mine, Claire perched beside him, the lawyer unfolding papers with an audible snap. The air reeked of coffee and hostility. On the table between us, my old tape recorder rested. I laid my palm on it, steady, protective. It hummed with weight, though it wasn't even turned on. Marcus, Mother, this is simple. If you sign these papers, everything will be smooth. No fuss, no drama. He slid a sheaf of documents across the table, the pages whispering like snakes. Me, smooth for whom, Marcus? For the man pretending to be dead? His jaw flexed. Claire reached for his hand, squeezing it like a cue. Claire, we only want what's best for you. Managing finances at your age is exhausting. Let Marcus handle it. Think of it as protection. I felt the insult in her tone, protection, as though I were a frail relic. Me, I've protected this family for decades. With every pound I earned, with every page I restored. Don't lecture me about protection. The lawyer cleared his throat, sliding the papers closer. Lawyer, it's a standard authorization. Mrs. Marlowe, your son will oversee your assets. Entirely legal, entirely safe. I met his gaze. Me? Legal doesn't mean moral. The rhythm quickened, words volleyed like blades. Marcus, you're overreacting. Father would have wanted this. Me, don't you dare speak for your father. Claire, we're offering peace of mind. Me, peace for you perhaps. Chains for me. Then the pivot, the blade they had hidden until now. Marcus shoved the pen toward me. Marcus, sign, or we'll take this to court. We'll prove you're unfit, unstable. Everyone already thinks grief has broken you. The words burned. A son telling his mother she was insane. I felt the tremor in my fingers, the old instinct to yield. But beneath my palm, the tape recorder was solid. It reminded me of every vow I had swallowed, every receipt, every hour of work that had built this family. I tightened my grip. My voice, when it came, was calm steel. Me? I am not insane. I am not weak, and I will not sign. Claire leaned forward, her smile brittle. Claire, don't be dramatic. You'll regret this. I met her eyes, finally allowing my anger to show. Me, the only regret would be surrendering what's mine. I rose slowly, the recorder under my hand, my spine unbent. For the first time in years, I stood not as someone's widow, not as someone's mother, but as myself. The first blow did not come from my son. It came in an envelope. A cream solicitor's letter slid through my door at 7:12 a.m., the kind that looks harmless until it cuts. Application for deputyship, it read. Marcus petitioning the court to manage my finances in light of concerns about capacity. Attached, supporting statements from people who barely knew me. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome to panic. I read the paragraphs twice, then a third time, my eyes snagging on phrases that didn't belong to me. Confusion, impaired judgment, erratic. I set the letter on the table next to my ledger and my old tape recorder, as if proof of my steady life might balance the lie. At 9:03 a.m., a social worker knocked. Just a welfare check, Mrs. Marlowe. She was kind enough, but my hallway felt invaded, my breath monitored, my book suddenly suspicious. When she left, her smile had the softness of pity. Pity is the first net they throw over a woman before they pull it tight. By lunchtime, the whispers had crawled into the neighborhood group online. Poor Elena. Such a shame, at her age. Someone used the word unhinged. I closed the laptop. The house hummed with a new kind of silence. The silence of a name being smudged. I rang a number a colleague had pressed into my palm long ago. Hale, barristers, a voice answered. Lawrence speaking. Mr. Hale, I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. I need you to help me hold a line before they erase me. Lawrence Hale arrived that afternoon, tall, spare, with the kind of eyes that take notes before you speak. He shook my hand once, looked around at the careful order of the room, the files stacked by month, the logged receipts I had kept for decades. You collect evidence, he said softly. Not a question. I resurrect dead words for a living, I replied. Now mine are being killed while I'm still breathing. He opened the solicitor's letter, read fast, then slower. They're building a picture, Elena. A false one, but contiguous. Will require weight to break it. I've weight, I said, and placed the tape recorder between us like a chalice. He nodded. Then we'll use it, but understand, they'll escalate before they retract. Escalate they did. Within 48 hours, statements multiplied like mold. A pharmacist wrote that I'd mixed up prescriptions on June 12/15, 42. I pulled my receipt from June 12/15, 18 vitamins, not prescriptions, and a text from my neighbor sent at 15. 51 showing me in her garden, kneeling with her roses, hands dirty and laughing. A bank clerk claimed I'd cried at the counter on August 8, insisting Daniel was alive. I handed Lawrence the CCTV still from Mr. Patel's bookshop, timestamp August 8/10, 57, where I sat signing a delivery sheet while Mr. Patel adjusted a display of Auden. He wrote a letter. Mrs. Marlowe did not cry. She recommended a binding glue and paid in exact change. She was, as always, competent. An old friend of Daniel stated I'd been hearing voices since spring. Lawrence circled the name. Fabricated or paid, he said. Either way, irrelevant if we outfact them. At night, I lay on the sofa, coat drawn to my chin, listening to the recorder's soft click when I pressed play. My own voice filled the room. Notes to self, dates, little lists. I had always spoken into that red dot to anchor memory. Now the same habit became defense. The next blow landed where it hurt most. Marcus submitted a care plan, proposing that I move closer to him for support. Translated, it read, "Give me her keys." Claire appended a paragraph about safeguarding. The word felt like a wire pulled through my ribs. Lawrence spread the pages on my table, arranging them as if they were tiles of an old mosaic. Their strategy, he said, isn't to prove you unwell. It's to show that enough people believe you might be. Courts hate uncertainty. It tempts them to err on the side of caution. We must replace uncertainty with proof. Proof. My language. My church. We began to gather it like harvest. Mrs. Whitcomb from number 14 brought tea and a handwritten note. Elena waters the street planters every Tuesday at 6. If that's madness, God bless it. She added a photograph me in my gardening hat, Tuesday 18/02, the watering can tilted in a silver arc. Zara, a young trainee from Lawrence's chambers, arrived with a portable scanner and a laugh that bounced off my ceiling. "We're digitizing everything," she said, tapping my ledger with reverence. "Your order could win its own medal." She cataloged receipts, annotated timestamps, and color-coded a timeline so clear it shone. Mr. Patel closed his shop early one evening and turned up with a biscuit tin full of printed photos from the last literary fair, July 22. In one, I stood at our stall explaining reversible adhesives to a librarian. In another, I ate a sandwich mid-bite, eyes amused. "Unhinged people don't lecture me about methyl cellulose," he wrote under his signature. Between visits, the house breathed again. The kettle sang, the radiator ticked. In the quiet pockets, I allowed myself to be cared for. It felt foreign and gentle, like learning a new script with the same old hands. But outside, the story tightened. A blogger, anonymous, hungry, posted a piece titled, "The Widow Who Hears Ghosts." They quoted a source who said I had been seen talking to empty rooms. The empty room was my studio, where I speak to manuscripts the way a midwife speaks to the laboring, encouragement whispered to bring a thing through. They made care sound like delusion. Lawrence read the blog and said nothing. He only stacked it beneath the pharmacist's claim, the banker's note, the invented friend's statement. "A pattern," he murmured. "Good. Juries like patterns, but so do we when they show orchestration." Orchestration by whom? I asked, though I knew the answer my gut feared. He looked at me a long moment. "Who benefits if you're discredited? Follow that line, Elena. It will take us to the conductor." We rehearsed. In my living room, in the afternoons when the light slants like truth, Lawrence conducted mock questions. Zara played the role of hostile counsel with alarming relish. "Mrs. Marlowe," she'd say crisply, "do you often confuse dates?" "I restore documents more ancient than your grandmother," I'd answer. "Dates are my trade." "And voices, do you hear them?" "Yes, in Latin, Greek, and occasionally in the petulant English of the living." We'd collapse into laughter, then start again, sharper. Lawrence trimmed my answers to their bone. "Spare, precise, no sermons," he'd remind me. "Let your evidence do the preaching." Between drills, the kettle again. A neighbor's cat learned the rhythm of our breaks and began to visit, leaping onto the ledger as if to approve the entries. I named him Soot. Small mercies built a scaffolding around my worry. Still, at night, fear returned like tide. I thought of Marcus as a baby, fists opening and closing in sleep. I thought of Daniel's coat, abandoned in the storeroom. I thought of the message, I'm alive, trust no one. Sometimes, in the thin hours, I turned it into a question. Trust no one? Not even my son? Not even myself? On September 12, 1940, my doorbell rang again. A courier, faceless behind a cap, handed me a package with no return address. Inside lay a photocopy of a document labeled Power of Attorney, dated 2 months before Daniel died. His signature flowed across the bottom, too neat, too symmetrical. I stared until the lines swam. Lawrence examined it the next morning, pulling a loop from his pocket like a conjurer. Hasty forgery, he said. The pressure line is wrong on the D of his name, and the date overlays are inconsistent. Whoever did this was arrogant or rushed. Or certain they wouldn't be caught, I said. He met my eyes. We'll catch them. And then, like a vindictive season, the public turned. A reporter called. We'd love your side of the story, Mrs. Ori, Mrs. Marlowe. I declined politely. Keep my words for the court, Lawrence had said. But the story did not wait for me. A headline sprouted. Woman cancels late husband's legacy. Legacy. As though money leaving my accounts each month were sainthood. I walked to the greengrocer the next morning and felt eyes touch my back like cold fingers. Some looked away quickly. Others let their gaze hang a second too long. A mother pulled her child closer. Shame tried to rise. I swallowed it whole. At home, I placed the reporter's card under a paperweight shaped like a quill. Ink, I whispered to myself, a bitter smile cutting my mouth. They think ink will win. That evening, I recorded a single sentence into the tape recorder. My voice level, my breath measured. They want to rewrite my life in counterfeit ink. I will prove it in real blood. Lawrence did not smile at that when I told him. He simply nodded, as if I'd set the last bead on a string. Good, he said. Now keep your pen dry. We move next. What is next? We file, he replied. And we build a stage where the truth cannot be shuffled off. We filed. Petitions and replies turned into dates on a calendar. Zara's timeline grew longer, then tighter. Mr. Patel gathered statements from customers who had watched me teach book care demos at 11, 0, 113,003, and 15,000 on August 8th, the very day the bank clerk claimed I was weeping in public. Mrs. Whitcomb unearthed a doorbell camera clip from June 12, 1548. I am seen accepting a parcel, signing with a practiced hand, steady as any scribe. Still, the other side adapted, inventing new breaches to plug the old. A doctor's note appeared attesting to my decline. Lawrence called the clinic. No such doctor worked there. We requested source files. The server glitched. Each time we tugged, the thread led deeper into a weave of arrogance. Each time we documented, the weave showed. At the end of one long Monday, I sat in the garden with Soot kneading my lap, the sky bruising to evening. A cool wind lifted the leaves. I held Daniel's coat around my shoulders, moth holes like constellations. Memory tried to warm me. Reality kept my back straight. Marcus texted, "This doesn't have to get ugly. Sign, and we can put it all behind us." I stared until the words blurred. Then I put the phone face down beside the recorder and turned on the red dot. The click was tiny and absolute. Ugly has already arrived, I said into the quiet. It lives here now, but so do I. I looked at the windows of the house across the street, lights blinking on one by one, lives tidying themselves for night. Mine was a different kind of tidying. Stacking, labeling, preparing for a room under white lights where I would not be allowed to flinch. I breathed in the damp scent of earth and ink and coat wool. Somewhere in the dark part of me, a question opened like a trap door. If Daniel is alive, and I believe he is, how far will he let them go before he shows his hand? And a darker question beneath it, when he does, will my son stand with him or with me? It was late afternoon when the envelope arrived. No postmark, no return address, just slid under my door like a shadow. I bent to pick it up, and the paper was cold, as if it had been sitting in ice. My fingertips tingled. Something in me already knew this was poison. I tore it open. A photocopy stared back. Power of attorney dated weeks after Daniel's supposed death. His signature sprawled across the bottom, bold, confident, arrogant. For a long second, the room tilted. My knees nearly gave way, but then I leaned closer. My eyes, trained by decades of restoring manuscripts, caught the lies instantly. The ink was too uniform. The loop of the D pressed heavier than the rest. The date had a faint blur at the edges, a digital overlay. Whoever had made this had never handled parchment, never known how a real hand trembles at the start of a line. My pulse raced. My fingers trembled so badly the page rattled. But my eyes blazed with clarity. I whispered to the empty room. So this is how they planned to bury me, under paper. The clock ticked on the wall, loud and mocking. I heard my breath echoing, sharp, fast. Images rushed through my mind. Marcus shoving papers across my table, Claire's brittle smile, the lawyer's cold tone, and now this. Proof that the grave they were digging was legal, not literal. For a moment, despair rose like a wave, threatening to drown me. But then something shifted. My hand still shook, but the tremor wasn't fear anymore. It was fuel. I pressed the forged paper flat against the desk, leaned my weight on it, and felt steel rise in my chest. You tried to fake his death. Now you fake his hand. You think ink can erase me. You think I'll crumble. But I am made of older parchment than you can imagine. The recorder clicked on beneath my palm. My own voice filled the silence, calm, deliberate. I hold the proof of their deceit. This time, the paper doesn't bind me. It arms me. Preparation became my new religion. My dining table turned into an altar of evidence. Bank receipts, camera stills, my leather ledger, every page dated and signed in my careful hand. The room smelled of dust and ink, like a library bracing for war. Lawrence came daily, his gray suit rumpled by long hours. Zara, the young trainee, scanned documents until her laptop hummed with heat. Neighbors dropped by with envelopes, photos, letters, small offerings to the truth. Each piece was a weapon. I lined them up like soldiers. A pharmacist's error refuted. A bank clerk's lie dismantled. A forged signature dissected under magnification. Data became my shield, but paper wasn't enough. I had to prepare myself. So I stood in front of the mirror, ledger in one hand, recorder in the other, and began to rehearse. At first, my voice quavered, cracked on simple answers. Yes, I manage my finances. No, I have never been unstable. My reflection looked unconvinced. Again, my throat ached. My palms sweated. Lawrence watched once, arms folded. Shorter, he said, sharper. Every word a nail, not a ribbon. So I pared them down. I manage. I remember. I refuse. Each night I played the recordings back. The early ones sounded like a widow begging for mercy. But slowly, the tremor lessened. The tone hardened. My own voice began to sound like someone I could believe in. One evening, Mrs. Whitcomb from number 14 knocked. She carried a tin of biscuits and eyes that gleamed with fierce loyalty. She placed her hand firmly on my shoulder. Elena, she said, you are not alone. Remember that in the room. You carry all of us with you. Her palm was warm, anchoring me. I nodded, throat tight. For years, I had been the giver, the protector. Now, unexpectedly, others lent me their strength. By the end of the week, the mirror no longer reflected a widow clutching papers. It reflected a woman standing steady, eyes unflinching, voice clear. I pressed record one final time, staring into my own reflection. This is not grief speaking. This is testimony. I am not broken. I am the witness who lived. The red dot blinked. My reflection blinked back. And I believed her. The courtroom smelled of varnish and sweat, the air too bright with white fluorescent light. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of strangers leaning forward, hungry for spectacle. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp as a bullet, and silence spread like a net. I sat at the long oak table beside Lawrence. My palms were damp, but my back was straight. Across the aisle, Marcus adjusted his tie. He didn't look at me. Claire sat close, lips thin with triumph, and their lawyer rifled through papers with the confidence of a man who believed victory already written. The bailiff read the petition aloud. Application for control of assets on grounds of incapacity and instability of Mrs. Prodham, Elena Marlowe. My name echoed against the wall, suddenly foreign. Marcus's lawyer rose first, his voice rich, almost theatrical. Your Honor, this is not about greed. This is about safeguarding. My client only wishes to protect his mother from poor decisions. There is evidence, multiple accounts, that she is unstable, prone to delusions, and unable to manage her affairs. He produced the forged power of attorney, sliding it across like a weapon polished for show. Even her late husband anticipated the need for guardianship. Lawrence stood smoothly, no theatrics. He lifted the document, turning it so the judge could see the ink shimmer. With respect, this signature was dated 2 months after Mr. Marlowe's recorded death. We will demonstrate it is a forgery. The judge's eyes narrowed. A first crack. Marcus took the stand. His voice was gentle, carefully tuned. My mother, she's been seeing things. She insists my father is alive. She talks to empty rooms. I fear for her safety. Lawrence's cross-examination was a scalpel. You claim your mother is delusional. On August 8th, you say she caused a scene at the bank? Yes. Lawrence lifted a photo from Mr. Patel's stall-me mid-bite in a sandwich, time-stamped August 8, 10:57. Then how was she simultaneously lecturing on adhesive techniques at a public fair? Witnesses confirm this. Which story do you want the court to believe? Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced at Claire. Claire tried next. Her tone was honey laced with poison. Elena has always been fragile. We've seen her misplace money, forget dates. Lawrence pounced. Mrs. Marlowe kept a financial ledger for 35 years. Exhibit B, every page dated, balanced, countersigned. More accurate than most banks. Does this look like the work of a confused woman? He placed the ledger before the judge, who traced the neat rows of ink with a finger. Claire's smile faltered. One by one, our allies stepped forward. First, Dr. Llewellyn, a neurologist who had tested me only weeks earlier. Mrs. Marlowe's cognitive faculties are intact. Memory recall above average for her age. Then, Mrs. Whitcomb, her shawl bright against the solemn room. Elena waters the street planters every Tuesday at 6. She never forgets. If that's madness, then God bless madness. Laughter rippled through the benches. The judge did not smile, but the weight shifted. Finally, Mr. Patel, holding his biscuit tin of photos. She teaches me about paper density and glue. If she's unstable, then I'm the Archbishop of Canterbury. The gallery chuckled again. Truth had found its rhythm. Still, the deepest cut came not from strangers, but from Marcus himself. When Lawrence pressed him, "Why file this petition? Why now?" Marcus's eyes flicked toward me for the first time in months. Because she cut off father's funding. He wanted his work to live. She destroyed it. The words sliced like razors. Not my mother, not her savings. Only she destroyed it. I swallowed hard. I saw the little boy he had been, fists curling in sleep. But the man before me was a stranger, a weapon pointed at my chest. When it was my turn to stand, the floorboards seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the railing, felt the grain of the wood steady me, and lifted my chin. My name is Elena Marlowe. I am 62. I restore manuscripts words older than any of us here. My hands are not as quick as they once were, but they are steady. My mind is not flawless, but it is mine. I gave my husband decades of labor. I gave my son education, a home, a future. I paid in pounds and hours, in skin cracked by parchment dust, in nights stitched with sacrifice. And now they would erase me as if I were a draft, a margin note, disposable. But I will not be erased. Yes, I am a widow. Yes, I am old. But I am still the author of my own life. And I will not sign away my name. Today I declare, I am not a shadow behind a man. I am the main page of my own book. The room stilled. Even Marcus did not meet my eyes. The judge leaned forward, voice clipped but resonant. This court finds the petition baseless. The forged documents are rejected. Mrs. Marlowe retains full control of her estate and affairs. Petition dismissed. The gavel struck. Once, twice, final. A sigh rippled through the gallery. Relief, release, something holy. My knees wobbled, but my shoulders felt suddenly light, as though a stone had rolled away. Lawrence squeezed my arm once, brief and firm. You've won, no more than that. I had lived. Light slanted through the high windows, falling across my hands like blessing. I let the tears come, not bitter now, but clean, saline as sea air. For months I had been shrinking, doubting, bracing for erasure. But here, under the harsh bulbs and the wooden crucible of judgment, I felt something astonishing. Freedom. I inhaled, and the courtroom smelled not of sweat and varnish, but of paper. My paper, my ink, my truth. The house greeted me with silence so complete it pressed against my skin. After hours of gavel strikes, shuffling papers, and voices raised in combat, the quiet felt unreal, as though the walls themselves had been emptied of breath. I closed the door behind me. The latch clicked like a period at the end of a sentence too long in coming. I slipped off my shoes, left them by the mat, and walked into the living room. The afternoon light had already dulled. Dust motes swirled in the air like tired confetti. The sofa sagged where I sank into it, and for the first time since the verdict, I let myself exhale fully. Victory, yes, but victory comes with its own kind of emptiness. My gaze fell on the coat draped over the back of a chair, the same wool coat Daniel had once laid across my shoulders when we were young, when love still felt like shelter. I reached for it, pulled it into my arms, and pressed my face against its worn fabric. The scent of cedar was long gone. Now it smelled only of dust and memory. Daniel, I whispered into the folds, my voice shaking in the stillness. If you are alive, look at me. I am too. Tears prickled but did not fall. They balanced on the edge, like guests unsure if they should stay. The trial scenes replayed behind my eyes. Marcus's gaze averted. Claire's brittle poise. The forged signature exposed. The judge's final gavel. The sound of wood striking wood still reverberated in my chest, part thunder, part heartbeat. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, what I felt was a strange hollowness. Winning had not returned my husband. It had not mended my son. It had only given me back what was always mine. Justice restores, yes, but it does not heal. I leaned back, the coat heavy across my lap, and let silence have me. The clock ticked, the radiator clicked. Life's small rhythms began to creep back into the house. I realized I was hungry, truly hungry for the first time in weeks. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and listened to the water gather. The whistle rose like a fragile song, and when I poured the tea, steam curled upward, delicate as hope. I carried the cup to the window and pushed the sash open. Evening air swept in, cool and salted with the smell of rain. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. For a moment, the sound caught me off guard. Joy still existed, careless and intact. I held my tea close, inhaled the warmth, and felt my chest loosen. The phone on the counter buzzed once, an unknown number. I let it buzz, let it fall silent. For months, I had jumped at every vibration, afraid of what it might expose. Not tonight. Tonight, I chose silence. In that quiet, I allowed myself a thought I hadn't dared. Perhaps freedom is not a roar of celebration, but the soft permission to sit, breathe, and not answer when the world demands. I set the cup down, returned to the living room, and placed the coat neatly in the wardrobe. For years, it had been a relic, a symbol of what I lost. Now it was simply cloth-worn, threadbare, but still whole. Like me, I touched its sleeve one last time and closed the door. I stood in the middle of the room, the air cool on my face, my lungs filling easily. The silence no longer pressed, it held me. The first morning in Lisbon smelled of salt and roasted coffee. I walked barefoot across the tiled floor of my new apartment, the cool ceramic grounding me, each step an affirmation. This was mine. No courtroom, no forged papers, no whispers through doors. Just me, the sea breeze, and the day waiting to be lived. I carried an espresso down to the Riverside Cafe across from my building. The cup was small, feather light. I lifted it with ease, almost laughing at how weightless it felt compared to the phone I had once held at Daniel's funeral. A phone that had vibrated like a stone tied to my chest. Back then, one message had dragged me into a grave of lies. Now, one sip carried me back into life. Classes began a week later. A dozen students sat at long wooden tables, their hands cautious but eager over brittle manuscripts. I showed them how to brush away centuries of dust without breaking the ink, how to breathe gently so that history did not crumble. Their eyes widened at the first faded words that emerged, letters stretching awake like limbs after sleep. On the lectern rested my old tape recorder, not hidden, not running, not guarding me against betrayal, just sitting there quiet, a relic turned keepsake. I let it remain in sight as a reminder. Once it was my shield, now it was simply part of my story. Professor Marlowe, one student asked, "Why do you still keep that old machine?" I smiled. Because every voice deserves to be remembered. Even silence has something to teach. At night, I would open my balcony doors and watch the river slide past, dark and endless. The city hummed below, guitars in the distance, laughter bouncing between narrow streets, the murmur of tides. I thought of Oxford's gray rain, of the oak table where I had once trembled over forged papers. That woman had been cornered, gasping. This woman now breathed freely, her chest rising to match the swell of the tide. The symmetry struck me often. Once, my phone had buzzed heavy in my palm, a message branding me with fear. Now, my espresso cup lifted light as air. Once, my living room had suffocated with silence sharp as knives. Now, silence was gentle, a friend that let me rest. Once, the coat in my wardrobe had been a tombstone for love. Now, it was folded in a trunk, ready to be mended, maybe even passed on to a student who needed warmth. Objects had not changed. I had. I kept a journal by my bed, not of court dates or expenses, but of small joys. Today, a student saved a manuscript from tearing. Today, I walked to the market without fear of eyes on my back. Today, the coffee tasted like sunlight. Each line felt like stitching myself whole again. Sometimes, I still thought of Daniel, of Marcus. The wounds they left had not vanished, but healing, I learned, was not about erasing scars. It was about learning to move with them, letting them draw new maps across the skin of my life. I never received another message. Perhaps Daniel had vanished for good. Perhaps he watched from some distance, waiting. It didn't matter anymore. His absence no longer dictated my existence. One evening, after class, I stayed behind in the empty lecture hall. I picked up the recorder, pressed the red button, and spoke softly into it. This is Elena. Today, I lived. I am still living. Then I clicked stop. I placed the machine on the shelf not as a guard, but as a witness. The next morning, at the cafe, I lifted my cup again, the breeze lifting my hair, the river glinting like 1,000 open doors. I want to end this story not with silence, but by speaking directly to you, the one who has followed me through every dark hallway, every courtroom, every whisper behind closed doors. Thank you, truly. Thank you for walking with me through each secret, each betrayal, each breathless moment when I wasn't sure I would still be standing. If you've read this far, it means you've carried part of my burden with me, and that makes it lighter. I've learned something I wish I had known sooner. The most dangerous lies are not the ones strangers tell about us. They're the ones our loved ones whisper, the ones we pretend not to hear because the truth would shatter us. So let me ask you only one question. If one day you discovered a loved one had deceived you, would you stay silent or would you press record on your own truth? That is the choice I faced. That is the choice, in some form, we all face. Maybe your betrayal won't come with forged papers or courtrooms. Maybe it will come with smaller cuts, dismissed words, broken promises, invisible debts. But each cut asks you the same thing. Will you bleed quietly or will you speak? I chose to speak, and though it cost me, it also freed me. If my journey has stirred something in you, anger, recognition, even just curiosity, I invite you to share it. Write your thoughts below. Tell me what you would have done or what you have done when the mask slipped from someone you trusted. Share this story if you think someone else needs to hear it, someone who might be living in silence, waiting for permission to hit record. And if you wish to walk with me further, follow along. There are more stories, more truths, more voices waiting to be heard. None of us should have to carry our secrets alone. So, what will you do when it's your turn to choose? Thank you for listening to mine. Now, it's time for yours.